Right, but anyway, to start at the the very beginning, I'm just going to navigate over to the Python on this computer. So I'll just bring up my File Explorer, and at least installed here in the classroom, there's a folder here, Python 3.11, and inside that we have a few things. And in order to do the editing, I'm going to use this IDLE idle. So there's two things that kind of show up that have the same icon there. Okay, so idle is the tool I want to use to do all of the programs in the course. And then you've got some other stuff down here that we need in order to run Python, but we're not concerned about those. And I've got this also pinned to the toolbar down here at the bottom, so it's easy. I don't have to navigate through this every time. But for the time being, I'm just going to open this up. And if you looked at the video on how to install, then you've already seen this. So this is the shell, and it's really quite empty in terms of most of the programming environments that you may have run into. There's nothing much here. And then these menu items, there's not even a whole lot of stuff there either. All right, so this thing is the shell. You can see up at the top there, idle shell. And in the shell, you can actually type commands, and those commands will be executed and run directly inside the shell, and it will give you an answer. Okay, for example, if I just wanted to write something really simple here, right? 3 plus 5, then that calculation is immediately done, and then the answer is printed back out. Python is what's called an interpreted language, so it interprets all of the statements that we have in a program from top to bottom. So it does them one at a time. And you can type in, we don't have to do multiple line statements yet, but you can type in multiple line statements here, like a for loop or an if statement or something like that, and when you're done, then it will execute whatever number of lines constitute that structured statement. And a lot of the textbooks, including the one you have, or if you look at resources online, then a majority of them, at least the ones that I've seen, they introduce the concepts of the language by using this interpreter. Now, I'm going to use an editor. I'm going to use the idle editor instead of here. By using the editor, we can create a program separately. Then when we're finished with the program, we can run the output. We can run the program and see the output here. The output is always going to show up in this shell window. Now, this one is real handy if you're working on a program and you kind of wonder how a statement works. Then it's very easy to just click over here to the shell, and you can type in that statement and see if it's the correct syntax or if it gives you what you want without having to put it into a file. For all of the work that we do in this course, I'm going to create a Python file. So underneath the file menu here in the shell, you have some options that look familiar if you've used almost any kind of editor anywhere. So we can open files, we can save them as various things, we can print from here. But for all of our work, I'm going to start out with a new file. So you can see this other window pops open. This window is the editor. And you can create a text file here in the same way that you would use an editor, a Word document, or if you're using a Notepad or something like that. This is just that kind of editor. The advantage to this editor is it does have some capability to analyze the Python code as you're typing it in, and it can point out some errors. Now, it's not as robust as something like VS Code or Anaconda, but it does the job. We're not doing highly complicated programs in this course. So those are the two windows to be concerned about here. We have our editor window where we're going to write the Python code. When we're done, we can run it from this menu item right here. Okay, run, and then run module. The answers, the output, is always going to show up over here in the shell. So you'll need to have both windows up in order to see what's going on. And I usually play around and try to get them both on the screen at the same time. Now, let's just start out and write a simple program here in the editor. And once we do this, then it'll be more obvious, hopefully, as to why we're using the editor instead of just typing commands into this shell. First thing is, what is a comment? Now, we can use the hashtag symbol. The Octothorpe, I guess, is its actual real name. And then on that line, we can type anything that we want to, and this is not interpreted. It's just documentation that goes into the program. Okay, so this is a comment. And in idle, we're using the default colors, it's going to show up red. Okay, so comments are used to describe your program. Okay, so you can, if you want to put a description of a problem here, then I will. Then you can do it this way. Okay, so they're ignored by the Python interpreter. Now, you will have discovered already I cannot type. So there's your first lesson then in Python, is this special symbol, this pound sign. And it allows you to type comments. And you can put those anywhere in your program. Diego?
The pound signs, I notice you have a blank one on the beginning and the end. Is that encapsulating it, or it doesn't?
It's just my preference. Okay. Yeah. I just like to separate. I like to separate things just by putting some blank lines in here. You can also just put a blank line without that. Now, I will go ahead and save this file. So you can find a place of your choosing on your computer to save it. I don't think I've made a folder for this semester, so let me go ahead and do that. Desktop, these are all from last term. So let's call this CS 104. Okay, summer 24. So there's a file then that's on the desktop that I'll use to save all the stuff that we do in the course. Okay, the first overall topic that I'm going to be going through, and it will go over several classes, is input and output. So that's what we'll start with, input and output. The way that we output something is we use the print statement. So pretty simple in Python. You just type the word print, and then in parentheses you can put information that you want to print. And by tradition, our first program is called Hello World. Now, you'll notice that this is green, and I started it with a double quote, and I ended it with a double quote here. All right, so whenever you have something like that, that's called a string. And since you know something about ASCII now, the information that appears between those double quotes, those are going to be the ASCII codes for whatever characters that I type. If we want to see what that produces, then I can click the Run or hit the F5 key. I'm prompted to save the file, and then you'll see in the shell we get the output, Hello World. So here's your next symbol that's special, and that's the double quote. In Python, we have another option. We can delineate strings with a single quote. So you have that option here, and this is really handy in Python because, as you'll see, that sometimes we want to write a sentence or we have a string that's got an apostrophe in it. And if that's the case, then we can delineate the whole string with double quotes, and we can still keep our single quote as an apostrophe. So this time, when I run it, then you see that both of these work. We have hello world with double quotes and hello world with single quotes. Now, things always go bad. Things always go wrong. Okay, so let me show you what happens. In this case, I'm going to mix them up. So I've got a single quote here at the beginning, I've got a double quote at the end, and that's not allowed. So here's an example of the error that you get in idle. For the most part, if you're an introductory programmer, then a lot of these messages are not going to be very easy to decipher. Unterminated string literal detected at line 8. Okay, what does that mean? Well, what that means is you've mixed up your quotes. Okay, but one thing that's helpful is notice the little the red highlight that shows you where it thinks that there's something wrong. All right. So I'd rather leave the single quote there, and I'll change this to a single quote over here. Okay, let's try this again. Let's do a double quote here. Hi, y'all, and let's do an apostrophe, and then close that with a double quote. Okay, so here's an example where it's nice to be able to have both the single quotes and the double quotes within the language, so we can print out the string hi, y'all, and have that as an apostrophe. Okay, so that works. So as long as you're careful about not mixing those up, then it's easy. If you wanted to print out something that included a double quote as part of what we wanted to output, you can start with a single quote, put your statement in there with the double quote, and close it with a single quote. Okay, let's continue to look at some special characters. So our first output statement here is just the print statement. Okay, so now I want to show you how to print something that goes across multiple lines. Okay, I'm just going to print out 1, 2, 3, but I will print 1 on one line, 2 on the next line, 3 on the third line. So double quote 1. And the special character that I want to show you is a \n. Okay, a \n is a carriage return, and it causes the remainder of the output to go on the next line. 2, another \n, and 3, close double quote. Okay, so the \n means send output to the following line, sometimes called a new line. Okay, so you can see that we now have 1, 2, and 3. Those are printed out on 3 separate lines. You'll also notice that the \n does not print out. So it's called a special character, a control character. You might have heard of it like that. So it does not print out. It's just a command that's used within the print statement. The print statement recognizes it as a special character, and it means go to a new line. Now the other one is the tab. Okay, so we can do a \t. It enters a tab into the output. Okay, so let's print out 1, 2, 3, but let's just separate them with tabs. Well, I'll use a single quote this time just to illustrate the difference, that you can use both. So 1 \t, that's a tab, and generally it inserts 5 spaces when it sees a tab. So 1, 2, another tab, and 3. Single quote this time. Okay, so it's going to print out the word 1, a tab space, 2, a tab space, and then 3. Yeah.
Again, for the single quotes and the single quotation and the double quotation, they do the same? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, you have that option. And the neat thing about Python is we'd have to do something special here to print out that apostrophe if we didn't have the double quotes as an option. Right? So it's nice that Python gives us both of those. Other languages like C, we don't have that. There's only one character that represents the beginning and ending of a string, and it's the double quote. A single quote in C means a single character, just one letter. Okay, so that's about it as far as the special characters that I want to show you. There are a number of others that are available, but I don't see the need to go into those. If you want to look into them, then you're welcome to do so. There are things like you can ring the bell or sound the tone. You can insert that in there. You can have it back up. There's a number of things, about a dozen or so, of what we call these control characters that are out there. But the new line and the tab are the ones that I'm pretty much only going to use those. Okay, so the output then is pretty simple, isn't it? We have a special command that lets us output information to the screen. Okay, now, in terms of how you want to format stuff that shows up on the screen, you can use these new line characters, you can use the tab, and you can always insert spaces. To format output. Okay, so let's print, double quote, okay, hello, and I'll just arbitrarily put some spaces in here. Welcome to, and then again, just to illustrate it, put some spaces there. And I've got a double quote, so I better close with that. Okay, so whatever number of spaces that you put in your print statement inside your string, then those will also be reflected directly on your output. In a few weeks, I will show you some of the formatting techniques that the language has. Very rich type of collection of formatting capability, but it's kind of cryptic, so it allows you to format your output very precisely. Numbers and characters, real numbers, integer values, and so on. So we'll get to that a little bit further on. And if you know how to do that already, in general, if you know something about the language that I have not covered, you want to use it in your homework assignments, then that's fine. Go ahead. Just make sure you know what you're using. Okay. Now the next thing is, how about input? So input. Read in data typed from the keyboard. Okay. So currently we just have our monitor as the output device, and we have our keyboard as our input device. In the not too distant future, we'll input and output data from files. All right, now, if we're going to read something in, then we have to have something that will collect that input. So let me just show you this, and then I'll explain it a bit more. All right, so I want to input my first name, and I want to save it in this variable, which I'll talk about shortly, called first name. So we have a print statement, and we have an input statement. So print is a reserved word. It's a function within Python, so is input. And the input function is going to expect us to type something in from the keyboard. And in order for us to know what to type in, we put a prompt here. So again, it's a string. Enter your first name. Okay, now I'm going to put another space after name and a double quote, and then I'm going to close the parens. So the print statement, everything that the print statement does is delineated with parentheses. Everything the input statement does is delineated with parentheses. So you got to make sure you match all those things up. All right. So what does that look like? All right, so we're down here. Move that up a little bit. So the program has, let's get that out of the way too. Okay, so the program's done everything that I've already put in there. So we got the print statement, so it's printed out all that stuff. But now, notice that at the very last line, we have this prompt. Okay, enter your first name. Okay, so it's sitting there, and there's a cursor blinking over there on the right. So when you have an input statement, then the program stops at that point, and it waits for you to enter whatever the input is. So we have to give it something now in order to make the program continue. It's not going to do anything else because I have no statements right now. All right, so I like to make up names instead of using my own. So I'm just going to make up the name George here. And then when I type enter, the program continues. And like I said, it doesn't do anything just yet. Okay, now let's also, after we typed in the first name, let's type in our last name. Let's do last name equals input, enter your last name. All right, let me show you what happens if I don't put that space there this time. Okay, now let's go ahead and print those back out once we get them entered. So let's have a print statement. And let's print out hello, first name and last name. So 3 things. Okay, hello, that's going to be a string. I want to print out the word hello, comma, first name, comma, last name, and then close the parentheses. So here's an example of the print statement where we're printing out multiple things. You can print out as many things as you want to, just separate them with commas. Okay, now notice that the program has started and it's waiting for me to enter something here to satisfy that first input. There's 2 lines of code still left in the program, but it will not execute those until I satisfy this input. Okay, so now it moves on, it prints out the next line. Okay, enter your last name. And notice that, this is trivial, but notice that the cursor is blinking right next to the E in name. Okay, so that's why I put a space here after the first one, because it just looks a little better. It's not, whatever I enter won't be right next to the E. Okay, so I'll type in the last name, and again, I like to have the space there. So I left it out on purpose to show you that. Now when I enter here, if I hit the enter key, then the program is going to go on and print out that statement, hello, first name and last name. Okay, so then we have hello, George Simmons. All right, now I want to go ahead and put the space right there on that. All right, so that's an example then of the input statement. A little bit further on, we'll find out how we can input multiple things at the same time. But for the time being, we can only input one thing with one input statement. When you add the commas, and notice I didn't type any spaces here. There are no spaces in there. Whenever you separate an output with the print statement, it automatically puts a space between those things. Okay, so we have hello space, George, hello, and then George space Simmons here. So if you're trying to align things carefully, using spaces, you need to remember that the commas are going to put a space in there. Okay, now let's modify this a little bit. Let's get it to go to a new line. So I want to put hello on the first line, first name on the next line, last name on the third line. Okay, so we have our \n. So we'll do hello, go to a new line. Now what's that going to look like? Oh, I have to have the cursor in the right place. Okay, so we have hello. Right, then there's a space. That space is there because of the comma. So George Simons is on the same line, but I wanted it to go to the next line. How can I make Simons go to the next line? We need a \n. Yeah. How do I put that in here? Okay. Say after the comma. Okay. All right. \n. Will that do it? Watch what happens. Unexpected character after line continuation character. Okay, so I can't do it exactly like that. What's missing? It has to be a string. All right. Notice up here, when I had the \t or the \n, it was inside a string. It has to be inside a string. All right. So let's put either a single or double quote around that. Okay, then it's going to need another comma. So if I want to go to a new line, I can't just put a \n. That \n has to be immersed within inside a string. Okay, so now, disregarding the spaces that the commas put in, now I can go 3 lines. Now, one reason I point that out is that you have to write your code very precisely. You have to be aware of the characters that you put in here. You need to be really good at proofing, technical writing or tech proofing, editing. Look at those characters very carefully because each one matters. And that's part of the joy or the terror of programming, is that those things are going to get you over and over again. Now, if I'd left out, if I leave out this comma right here, I still get an error message there, right? Because it doesn't understand what that is. Yeah, this one's kind of handy. Perhaps you forgot a comma, okay? Yeah, I did. Just for illustrative purposes, I left it out. Okay, so input and output. Now, let's talk about variables. When you typed in your first name and you typed in your last name, we had a word here, first name and last name, in order to capture that input. It has to go somewhere. So the input statement prompts us to type something in. It takes what we type in, it does what we call assigns it to this variable over here. And we are using, or will be using variables in all sorts of ways because we need variables to hold data. If we want to do a calculation, we need to have variables to do the calculations and to accept any inputs that we want for those variables. So a variable then is just some kind of identifier that contains information. So I want to give you some rules for variables. All right, see if I can number these. I apologize for the very poor typing. Okay, so a variable must begin with a letter. Okay, that is, it needs to be an alphabetic letter. It can be lowercase, A through Z, or uppercase. Okay, now technically you could also begin a variable with an underscore if you want to. Usually variables that begin with an underscore have a special meaning, so typically we're not going to do that. Okay, let's put a T on must. Okay, second rule. After the first letter, variables can contain any number of letters and digits. Okay, so after the first character, a variable can contain any number of letters digits and underscores. Okay, so it can contain lowercase letters A through Z, uppercase letters A through Z, and the digits 0 through 9. And it can be as long as you're willing to put up with that name. You can have it as long as you want. And we have only 4 rules. So here's the third one. Variables cannot contain any special characters. Okay, so things like exclamation, $, a backslash, stuff like that. So you can't put those special characters in there. Okay, and finally, variables cannot be reserved words. Okay, reserved words are words that are used by the Python language. We've seen 2 of them already. Okay, so you cannot make a variable called print. I guess technically you can, but that would make bad things happen. All right, so those are then the rules for your variables. So you can name them whatever you want to name them as long as you follow these rules. One thing that a lot of people end up doing is they try to put a space there. Okay? So a space is not allowed. So with your variables, yeah, I could use an underscore there, but I can't put a space in there because it thinks that there's 2 separate things there, name and first. But we're pretty much accustomed now with doing file names and putting spaces there, which we can do just fine if we're making a folder or naming a file. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Look at some examples of variables. Okay, and I'm going to give these variables values. Okay, weight, that's a perfectly good variable. Okay, so I can declare a variable just by writing it down. In the Python language, I don't care about what type this variable is going to be. Python will figure that out. In this case, since I'm saying weight is equal to 250, then Python is going to think that's just a positive integer. And from last time, you know what a positive integer is. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to assign a constant value to the variable weight. Okay, so this 250, that's just a constant number. It does not change. All right, now let's look at something else. Okay, let's call this variable my_course equals, and these things are called assignment statements, by the way. If you've got an equal sign here, then you're assigning a value on the right to the variable that's on the left. My course is going to be a string. All right, so if I start with either a single quote or a double quote here, then I can put in something like CS104 Python. Okay, so this assigns a string to variable my course. Okay, and again, you know from last time that if we have characters that are encoded like this, then we use that ASCII encoded table, or that standard. And this time it's okay. I mean, this space shows up as part of the string, and that's perfectly fine. So a string starts with a double quote or a single quote. It ends with a single quote or a double quote. All right, so in this case, I'm assigning CS104 space Python to the variable my course. We're going to print these out in just a minute, and we'll see what we get. Now I'm going to redo the first name that I did above. In fact, I'm just going to copy that same line. since that's a little bit long, let me put a comment here before it. Okay, set the value of a variable with data from the keyboard. Okay, so first name could be anything that we type in, okay? Any string that we want to. So in the upper two cases here, 250, that's just an integer constant. I can initialize variable weight. Okay, my course, I have a constant string here. But with first name, if I want to give it a value, then I type what that value in. It comes in from the keyboard through the input statement, and that gives first name a value. All right, now, next thing is, let's do a couple of things here. I want to show you how you can set a variable by doing a calculation. So let's say length is equal to 3.5, and width is equal to 7.2. And then let's compute an area. I can type that area equals the length times width. All right, so in Python, the asterisk means to multiply. So this is going to set the value of variable area with a calculation. Okay, so in other words, you can specify the variables simply by just typing out whatever you want. Variables, they ought to have a name that represents what they contain instead of just using something like x is equal to 250. If you really want that to be the weight, use the variable weight. So make your variables reflect whatever data that they can contain. Now, what about length width here? What type is length going to be? It's going to be a float, so it's going to be a real number, right? Because it's got the dot right there. So that means length and width, those are going to be stored internally based on this IEEE format we talked about last time. How about area? What type do you think it'll be? And why do I care about types? Well, it's important to know what type it is. Well, if the two things that are being multiplied are real numbers, floats, then so will the area, this variable over here. So this is just an example now of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 variables, and how you can initialize those variables. Okay, the last part of this program now is we're just going to print out some information about these variables. All right, now I'm going to print them out. Let's identify what they are. Double quote, weight equals sign, double quote, comma, and weight. Okay, so this will print out weight equals sign and then the actual value for the weight. And to save a little bit of time, instead of running it right now, I can also get the type of that output. Okay, so here's another built-in Python function. It's called type, and I want to get the type of weight. Move that up the screen a little bit. All right, so here's another function. Notice the color. Okay, print is kind of a blue or purple color input, and so is this thing here, type. So those are reserved words. So in Python, if you see that color, you know, hey, that's a reserved word and is invoking a function of some sort. The function this time has its own set of parentheses. So we have type, we have a left paren, we have the thing we want to get the type of, close parentheses, and then the entire print function also has that. So you'll learn very quickly that you have to have a balanced parentheses as you're writing your code. So equal number of left and right parentheses. Okay, so let's run this one and let's see what that looks like. And we're almost done with this first example, by the way. Okay, I got to enter some data again. So we're down here where I'm redoing that input for your first name. And now this is from that print statement at the very bottom. Weight equals. All right, so great. You can see here that, yes, the string weight equals is printed out with a space. I set the value to 250, so yeah, it's going to be 250. The other thing that it gives me, and don't worry about the class part of this yet, and that's an integer. So the type function prints it out in this format, but that tells me that it's an integer. So you can always find out what type the data is in your programs if you need to do that. Okay, now let's do the first thing for a couple more. I'm not going to do all of them. Let's do first name and let's do area. And that'll be the end of this one. Print, okay, double quote, first name. I'll do another equals, double quote, comma. I'll print out the first name, it will print out the type. And it's going to be a string. And then let's do the area. And that's good enough. So that gives me something that's an integer and something that's a string and something that's a real number. Okay, let's work our way down. All right, so notice that the output that we get at the bottom, okay, so the weight, it really is 250. Okay, the first name that I entered up here, okay, that's Roger. I'll print that back out. And it's a string, and there's a 3-character prefix for the type, so str. And then the area computes to be 25.2, and since those are real numbers, it prints out float. Okay, so it's a floating point number, and again, corresponding to the IEEE format. So you can now see the variables, you can see the values the variables have, and you can also see the types of those variables. All right, so that's the end of my program, and I'm going to say so end of program, just to show you that you can put these comments in anywhere that you want to. Okay, the comments can go on the same line as long as you put it on the right-hand side. Now, once it sees that that pound sign there, it's not going to interpret anything else. It ignores it as a comment. And depending on how you want to write your code, how verbose you want to be, you can put these in anywhere that you want to. Okay, that's the end of this program. Let me ask you for questions.